He underscored the boon Trump may have already offered Moscow on the battlefield. Quote, "It would be much more important if the Americans stopped giving them intelligence information. Then this would allow us to achieve results more quickly," he said. This is something the Russians didn't hide wanting Trump to do, and this is something that today Trump has done.
Trump has totally betrayed Ukraine, and he's betrayed American values. And what he's done in the last couple of hours is drive the knife deeper into the back of the Ukrainian people, into the backs of our allies and NATO and America's standing in the world. This is cutting the legs out from under the Ukrainians in the next way. He just keeps going phase after phase in crippling their ability to defend themselves from a foreign aggressor. So it's hard to imagine a situation where it would be a better week for Putin and for the Russians. Our enemies are celebrating. And what Trump continues to do is victim shame Zelensky and the Ukrainians. He's turning it upside down. He's trying to change the narrative for the world and for what is truth. And all of us as Americans have to push back now and stand for the Ukrainian people, even if our president and vice president and his administration won't. This is not just about their national security. It's about ours. And we've never been more isolated. We've never been more hated. And I think we've never been more vulnerable than at any other time, except maybe when we invaded Iraq. And we don't have all those allies around us anymore. As a reminder, too, 40 Ukrainian troops died in Iraq, standing alongside of us. They've always stood alongside of us. And the president right now is totally betraying them.
What does it look like to turn around military supplies in its tracks?
It's devastating. I mean, it's people waiting for ammunition. It's people waiting for resupplies. And the intelligence assets are also devastating because now they don't know about inbound missiles that might hit children. And I think that's what we have to remind the folks who maybe are somehow mixed up about this. I mean, can you imagine if our allies said this to us after 9/11? If they said, you know what, we're going to deny you intelligence assets, we're going to deny you military resources, and good luck, trying to negotiate with al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden. It's upside down world, and we have to push back on what is true and what is right. The Russians are the bad guys. The Ukrainians are the good guys. And if we stand with Russia, we are becoming the bad guys. And that's devastating, not just for Ukraine, but for America.
What is, in your view, the best way to do that?
We have to stand with Ukraine. I mean, we should have continued the path of standing with Ukraine and standing with NATO and pressuring Putin instead of pressuring Zelensky. That's why this is victim shaming. There's no focus on crippling Russia. There's no focus on denying Russia. There's no focus on even talking about Russia. Last night's State of the Union address totally, abandoned any kind of rhetoric that would put pressure on Putin. So ask yourself, what is he doing to put pressure on Putin? He's doing nothing. He's doing absolutely the opposite. That's why the Russians are celebrating. Our enemies are celebrating around the world, and America continues to be more vulnerable and more at risk.
After the VA had expanded during the Biden administration, as well as to cover veterans impacted by burn pits. For some veterans, that means not just worrying about what this means for their health care and their families' health care, they could also lose their jobs entirely. More than 25% of the VA's staff and workforce is made up of veterans. Paul Rieckhoff is here. Also joining us, Msnbc political analyst Tim Miller, the host of the Bulwark podcast. Paul.
So I've warned that they're going to come for the strongest and biggest places first. And they went to the Pentagon first, and I have tried to warn people they're coming for the VA next. It is a place that has a large federal budget. It has hundreds of thousands of employees. It's culturally very important. It's symbolically very important. And this is right on strategy. I've warned folks that Musk is going to come for the VA. And now his flamethrower of destruction is firmly focused on the VA. They see how big it is. They see how valuable it is. They see how important it is culturally. And they are firing 80,000 people as a start. There's still a lot more way to go. And 25% of VA employees are veterans themselves. But 1/3 of all government employees are veterans, right? So I think that they are coming at us very hard. And I think in some levels there's a silver lining here because they've misjudged this. Because the purge patriotic people, I think, are going to become the foundation and the core of the opposition. Whether it's somebody like C.Q. Brown, it's the fired FBI workers, or it's the now thousands, probably tens of thousands of veterans, they are going to organize. They already are. They're protesting at VA facilities. They're protesting at Tesla dealerships. And anybody who crosses veterans politically in American history usually pays a price. So this may be the leaders we're looking for, are people like that guy Rodriguez and others who are going to rise up to this moment and pierce through the crap.
I want to believe that. I'll grab onto that. It'll get me through the next hour and a half. But I want to understand why veterans believe Trump is interested in dismantling an agency that is on the other end of a desperate call or a health crisis. And in a lot of parts of this country, frankly, a lot of red states in this country, they're hours away as it is. Why weaken that fragile lifeline?
Because I think it's part of the larger strategy, which is to take down the government to its studs. And for decades, the Koch brothers and others had a grand vision of ripping down the VA and privatizing it. Pete Hegseth was the leader of Concerned Veterans of America, which for years advocated for ripping down the VA and privatizing it and sending it out into the private market. And I think that this has always been a prime target for them, regardless of whether or not veterans are there. And I think the insight here is they don't care about veterans. They don't care about anyone. They care about an ideological agenda and seizing the levers of power. And what I would tell folks is if they treat veterans like this, if they treat retired generals like this, how do you think they're going to treat everyone else? How do you think they're going to treat you? We are just first. But this is a line they're going to work their way down. It started with DOD, and now they're at VA.
They're also trying to erase the steps taken by President Joe Biden to deal with burn pits and that massive effort, which was a huge effort, a recent effort. I guess least importantly, a political accomplishment of Joe Biden's, but that didn't seem to be the point when the work was being done. How do you see that?
Devastating. I mean, we fought basically for 3 decades to pass the PAC Act, right? And that provides support for toxin exposures all the way back to Agent Orange. This is what Vietnam veterans were fighting for, in addition to burn pits. Folks will remember Jon Stewart had to go down to Washington and shame them into moving this forward. But I think it's part of this larger agenda, which is about getting people to give up, getting people to quit, getting people to say, you know what, it's too hard to drive in, I'm out, right? And getting people to surrender so that they can remove opposition, consolidate power, and move the overall agenda forward. And veterans are a pain in the ass, right? If you can get thousands of them out, that's going to be beneficial to your political agenda. The problem is they're going out into protests. They're going out into veteran service organizations. They're going to run for public office. And I view this in a different context than the normal political one. This is almost like the anti-war movement, right? You're seeing people speak out. You're seeing people be brave. And I'm not looking for members of Congress. There are new John Kerrys. There are new Bobby Muellers that are going to emerge. It's going
to come from the public. I think you're right. I think we've crossed through this passageway where you're not looking to an elected politician to save you, right? Paul Rykoff, it's an important day to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you.
For being here with us. Tim sticks around. The latest episode of Paul's podcast, Independent Americans, is out now. Really important conversation with Senator Mark Kelly about lots of things, but including the latest standoff over Russia's war, Russia's invasion into Ukraine.